Hi, I'm Dr. Gaby Cora, and welcome to my show, Dr. Gaby's Take, Make Life Interesting. Our topic today is leadership and influence. What a topic. Well, if we surveyed most of our corporate executives and or entrepreneurs, we would probably see that many of them were bossing other kids around. Many of them were probably organizing big events in school, and many of them were probably also inventing gadgets while they were in school. Which leads us into our second question, which is leadership, is a leader born or made? This is the eternal dilemma. So is it nature or is it nurture or is it a combination of both? Well, I strongly believe that we really are born with many of these leadership traits. A lot of it has to do with our personality. So some traits such as ambition, for example, or tons of energy are probably wired into our brains from the moment we're born. Now, at the same time, though, the environment will predetermine whether or not we will be able to rise to the occasion. So nature versus nurture, let's say that there's a true combination of both. Now, sometimes we can have all these traits that may be dormant in some shape or form. And which brings us to another concept, which is quite interesting too. Do leaders are they always guided by positive ways of leadership or negative ones? So if we could predetermine that there are these traits that with which we are born with, but we will need to make a decision as to whether or not to use these traits in a positive environment and or in a negative environment, that will be an interesting choice, an interesting decision for that leader to make. So that's a second point there too. Now the third point is a leader, does a leader become a leader by accident or by design? Many times a leader will rise to the occasion when he or she realizes that there's a need for his or her leadership. And some other times that person will become a leader when other people ask them to become the leaders. Now, by design, sometimes we will continue to go up, for example, that corporate ladder, and we will get that denomination of authority. So we will become a director or a manager or whatever other position as we're coming up the ladder, and that will be another interesting point to consider. The third point that is also interesting today is what are the qualities of a leader? What I found is in my work is that many leaders tend to be bossy in general. So there's some kind of inflexibility or rigidity that we can see at first. Many leaders rise to the occasion by being able to make a tough decision when the time demands for that decision. However, at the same time, I've seen that many great leaders have become more and more flexible through time. Probably because they've needed to, probably because they've been coached to become more flexible also, but also because they become richer in their traits, in their ability to do certain things particularly when they realize that becoming too bossy, being too direct, or just giving orders to everyone won't get the job done. The second part, which is very interesting too, is does a leader reign by being charismatic or by just flagging their title? And true leadership has some of that charisma flowing most times, and it's inviting of other people to follow through that leadership. So this brings me to another point, which is, does then a leader become a leader by being bossy or by ruling by consensus? And what I've seen is that there's many leaders who, if they've been really nurturing that flexibility, they will be able to lead by giving directions directly at certain points in time and by inviting consensus when there's time for consensus. So that's a bit of a mix of what I've seen in terms of leadership and influence. Now, another interesting point about leadership is, how does a leader create, maintain, and then grow their own tribe? The first common denominator I usually see is that most leaders inspire others with their vision. In a way, if I have a vision and if I have an idea of a better future and I can effectively communicate this to other people are going to be inspired by this and they will try to follow. The second part is having some flexibility in foreseeing some needs that may be important along the way. True leaders are going to be able to foresee that even before their tribe may even see that need itself. And the third one is, how do you really grow your tribe? How do you really grow your social network? How do you really grow that group of followers? And you really do this by inviting other people to feel like the tribe belongs to them as well. When a leader invites others to feel that it is our tribe and not my tribe and your following, that's where true leadership resides. So thank you for joining me in Leadership and Influence today. Let me introduce you to my guest today, the iconic Randy Gage. Randy is a self-made millionaire. He is a master mentor, an international speaker, and a very savvy entrepreneur. From behind the scenes, I hope you will enjoy this interview as much as I have enjoyed it myself. I was chatting with her and she said, well, as long as you keep away from religion and politics, you'll be fine. So it's just so funny.
That's the conventional wisdom. Right?
Absolutely.
But that's not what people, if you look at who I think is the most fascinating interviewer in the business right now is Piers Morgan. And he asks questions that you really want to know. I saw him interview Joel and Victoria Osteen. And I saw him do Oprah, I saw him do Herman Cain, I saw him do Huntsman, because I don't see a lot of TV, but it's fat, and I never watch those kind of cable news channels, but I have really come to this belief that Piers Morgan is really turning into must-watch TV. And like when he's interviewing Osteen, he says, I don't remember the exact wording, but the fact was, there's no other way to say this, but you're really like filthy, stinking rich, aren't you?
You love that, I'm sure.
And Joel just laughed and said, well, yeah, we've been blessed. He said, no, not blessed. You're like filthy, stinking rich, How much are you really worth? And he's like, oh, I don't know. Come on, don't tell me you don't know. How much are you worth? Did the same thing with Oprah. Neither one would talk about, of course, which I don't blame them. I wouldn't either. It's,
sure.
Security today, that's kind of crazy. There's a lot of crazy people out there. But and then he was like, so, and you don't take a salary from the church, right? I said, no. You just make your money with books and CDs and stuff. Yeah, but you sell a lot of books, don't you? And like, yeah, I've been blessed, But it's the kind of conversation that your mother would have said it's not polite to ask those questions, but those are the questions really people want. And I don't think we should be invading people's privacy in the ways that the media is crossing the line now. Here's the next frontier that will fall. It will be when a major, and it won't start with a major one, it'll start with a blog, but some blog, this is my prediction, some blog will out a very high-profile gay athlete. who makes 20 million a year, who's a big star in baseball or the NFL or the NBA or something, and then the major news organization is going to pick it up and say, well, we had to pick it up because this blog was reporting it, and because it was news, that's why we're doing it. And that's really like the day, when the Miami Herald was camped outside of Gary Hart's place in the bushes, and, they've crossed the line, and I don't think that's prosperous or good, but I think we certainly could go more with real questions that matter to real people, and where it's relevant, where it's, and allow people that they're, just because you're a movie star or a sports athlete doesn't mean we have the right to know everything about you, and some people seem to think you do.
Well, one of the things is with the political correctness, I think a lot of it is being missed in terms of being candid and just open about having some real conversations. And sometimes that's mixed up with just being an invader or intrusive in your personal life. So, it is interesting. What do you think that in Piers Morgan's case makes him a great interviewer and a daring interviewer? Like, do you think that maybe maybe having a different cultural background, being raised somewhere else where those questions may be asked regularly? I mean, I don't know.
In his case, I think it comes because he was a newspaper editor back in the UK. So he's used to find it, hey, what's the meat of the story, what's the angle, what's the slant that nobody's getting here, is probably what he was instructing his reporters all the time. And I think he brings that to his interview. And it's somebody like Joel Osteen, I think that's the kind of question you have to ask. Because, I mean, come on, these televangelists are multi-million dollar corporations. They're influencing millions of people. And you have these crazy ones like the guy who keeps projecting the world's going to end about 8 times in a row now. And he's made millions of dollars with his cult of followers. And, somebody like a Pat Robertson or a Joel Osteen who has these television ministries. Fact is, those are very lucrative, profitable businesses.
So what do you think is we're missing from not openly discussing anything about religion, sex, and politics?
Well, religion, sex, and politics are what matters to people, right? So, and like sex, do I think we're supposed to out gay athletes? No, because I think it has nothing to do with the profession that we are channeling them in. Right?
Well,
They're getting paid to play basketball, not their sexual life isn't relevant.
And honestly, I'm sorry to interrupt, but I've never needed to go anywhere and say, by the way, I'm straight.
Yeah,
it's like I've never needed to say that. Right. So why would anyone? I would not assume that anyone else would need to do the same thing. Right. In my case, I have some openly gay family members. I adore them, and I feel comfortable talking about them in camera because people know about this. They've been very open, but I would not feel so comfortable, talking about them. Although I adore them, if they felt uneasy about it.
Right. So to out somebody who wants to keep that private, I think that's just an invasion of privacy. Where I'm talking about sex, like in my work, I'm looking at the sexual transmutation, the energy, like Napoleon Hill talked about in Think and Grow Rich. And that's one of the most powerful forces of human nature is sexual energy. And the most successful people in the world, they channel that energy. They learn, and that's why, Hill talks in the book about why seems to be men don't really become successful, a lot of them, until they're in their 50s, because it takes them that long to learn how to channel that energy. And politics, you can't, for me, I'm a guy who talks about prosperity, and you can't talk about prosperity without talking about, like in my case, I'm a rabid libertarian, because that's the only philosophy which is congruent with the principles of prosperity. So I'm going to talk about that, and religion. There's probably nothing in the world, no force in the world that has done more to brainwash people with limiting beliefs and negative mind viruses than organized religion. So I have to talk about them because I'm not going to tell people what they want to hear. I'm going to tell them what, that's my job as an author, a speaker, a coach, It's not to tell them what they want to hear. It's how I perceive what they need to hear.
How about religion? I know you're highly spiritual, and many people confuse being spiritual with being religious, or feel that there needs to be some sort of organization behind that. So when did you realize, how this operated and how it was impacting upon you and the people that you serve also? Because you've been helping thousands of people, and I know your principles, you're very straightforward about the way that you think about them and the way that you teach.
Yeah, I grew up an atheist, a rabid, diehard atheist, and probably about 30 years old, I was exposed to religion at a time in my life where I was really searching, because nothing in my life was working. My health, my relationships, my business, everything was cratering. So I was open to it, and I looked at organized religion, and that didn't speak to me, so I didn't get involved with it. I still felt like, okay, I was open to the possibility that there was a higher being, a divine force. So I got open to that, but I was totally turned off by organized religion. And then I found Unity and Science of Mind, the works of Charles Fillmore and Ernest Holmes, and that fit for me. So I am very spiritual, and I have a Unity church here in Miami that I attend, Unity on the Bay, that helps me nourish my spiritual sustenance without all the doctrines and dogma that you see with many organized religions.
So that, and in a way, that I think that's also impacted the way that you help other people as well. Like, I attended one of your Unity church gatherings that you had, starting like at 8 p.m. going through 4 a.m. And just the ambiance, the energy was great in a way as well. So.
Well, yeah, it totally impacts what I do, because my work is I don't do book reports. There's a lot of speakers that they're doing book reports on whatever's on the bestseller list. They don't need me to do that. They can just buy the book and get what the author said. My work, whether it's my blog or my latest book or my latest seminar, I'm just telling you what's working for me right now. I don't claim to be an all-knowing, omniscient, omnipresent, whatever guy. I'm a guy who was sick and broke and frustrated for 30 years of my life, and now figured out some things, and I really have a wonderful life. And I'm just sharing what's working or not working for me in the moment. And so that deeply impacts my work.
When did you decide to be a rabid libertarian? Have you always been one, or did you kind of grow into one?
No, I was in the South they call a yellow dog Democrat, which means if the Democrat was a yellow dog, you'd still vote for him, because when you're young and idealistic, the Democratic Party seems to be hey, let's save everybody, and it's very socialistic leaning, the Democratic Party, which is, hey, we got to save all the poor people. And then as you mature, and it was. I can't even remember. Maybe it's Churchill or somebody said, they said something to the effect that if you weren't, and I'm paraphrasing, I'll take it to our vernacular here in the United States, which would be, if you weren't a communist when you were a child, then you have no heart, and if you're a communist when you're an adult, you have no brain. Something to that effect, and I believe that, because communism, it's one of those things that sounds good, it looks good on paper. It just doesn't work in the real world. It's a broken model. It doesn't really work. And it doesn't help all the people. It doesn't create good. It doesn't distribute the wealth fairly, or any of those arguments made for it. They're all a lie. And that's why it didn't work in Russia. It's not working in China. It's not working in Cuba. It hasn't worked anywhere. And I travel all the world. I've spoken in more than 50 countries. Denmark, very socialistic. Sweden, very socialistic. Here in the United States, getting more and more socialistic. That stuff doesn't work. So, but if I look at the Republican Party, which is, okay, yes, I'm all for less government and don't raise taxes and limited government. Okay, but then why do they want to meddle in everybody's bedroom and tell them what to do and what women should do with their bodies and all of that other stuff? So as I've evolved in my philosophy for living over the course of my life, I come to realize, so it's probably, I don't know, 10 years ago, I realized, I gotta support the libertarian philosophy, because that's what's congruent with the principles I believe in.
I love how you talk about making a choice to be happy. And knowing that you've worked with so many people from around the world, what would be the things that you usually see block people in allowing themselves to make these choices?
90+% of the time, it's a worthiness issue. They just have subliminal, subconscious programming that they're not worthy of success. And organized religion is a big guilty party here a lot of the time. A lot of times it's just this subliminal programming they got from pop culture, TV shows and movies and books. Government, of course, needs us to be needy, so they foster that entitlement mentality. So there's a lot of very voracious, insidious forces programming us that money is bad and rich people are evil and it's noble to be poor, spiritual to be poor. And so on this conscious level, they're striving for success, but at the subconscious level, they're sabotaging their success as soon as it gets near a breakthrough.
And even on your life, during your lifetime, you struggled with that yourself. Did you take that quantum leap on your own, or did you count on mentors? Did it just take time and different mentors? How did you find your own way to self-worth?
Here's what I found is the breakthrough, the tipping point, if you will, is the magic of 51%. It was when everything changed for me was when I had 51% positive thoughts versus 49% negative thoughts. Because I started off, when it all started, in my case, everything broke down when I was 30. Health was shot, business was seized by the IRS, auctioned off. I'm in debt, I'm selling my furniture, sleeping on the floor, eating macaroni and cheese every day. Everything, relationships, everything's broke down. So at that point, I have two choices. One, blow my brains out, or two, change, right? So I didn't have the guts to blow my brains out. So fortunately, I changed.
It's nice to have you here today.
Yeah, it's good to be here today. Because I would have missed a lot these last 22 years, a lot. But I was so riddled with negative programming, so riddled with limiting beliefs, that the default position, we all have a default setting. So, the default setting in my family for generations was negative. So if you said, let's go to the movies, I'd say, we'll never find a parking space. If you said, what a beautiful day, I'd say, well, it was raining like crazy yesterday. I bet it's going to rain again today. It was just my default setting. So at 30, when everything broke down, I was working 2 hours a day on self-development. Because I had nothing else to do. I had no job to go to. So I'd be out looking for jobs, and then I'd have nothing else to do but think about my miserable life of quiet desperation. So I spent 2 hours a day reading Charles Fillmore and Ernest Holmes' Science of Mind and stuff like that. And so I started to have some positive thoughts sometimes, which are immediately smothered by negative thoughts, because of the overwhelming percentage of negative thoughts and limiting beliefs. But by working on that every day, and I felt it took 2 years to make myself over. And at the end of 2 years, I thought, I actually like myself. I actually like my life. I wasn't rich yet, I wasn't successful, but I liked myself and I liked the direction I was going. And then and it's funny, if you read Deepak Chopra, and he talks about the 50 billion cells in our body, and they're always dying and regenerating, and he would say it would take 2 years for every single cell in your body to completely regenerate. So that was fascinating to me. That took 2 years, and then I felt like I had made myself completely over. Then I felt like in a year I made myself all over again. Then I felt like I made myself over in 6 months. And now I'm always amazed at how ignorant I was 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago, right? Because I'm at such an accelerated personal development right now. And I think it's the big breaking point, though, was the tipping point was when the positive thought got to 51%, because then the default setting switched from the negative side to the positive side. And then when somebody said, it's a beautiful day, I'd say, yeah, isn't it gorgeous? And that mindset shift changed everything.
When did you start noticing that people reflected that back to you? And how did it feel?
During those 2 years when I made myself over, I mean, I could see some things. People would comment. People who used to avoid me like the plague, because I was just a toxic personality, right? Didn't feel like they had to avoid, and would say things to me. You know, people who I used to, because I'd have people who had tried to reach out to me, you know, and they'd say, you know, I'd say something, and they'd say, "Do you really want to affirm that?" You know, and I'm like, oh, this tofu burger shit, you know, affirm this, that, you know, but after 2 years, I was like, wow, the words I choose really are powerful, and I really do need to be careful what I speak, because that's what I'm programming into my subconscious mind.
When did you start finding that many people heard you, listened to you, and that people really started looking up to you for that guidance?
People always listen to me because I am a strong personality. They listened to me when I was 15, when I was disrupting the class, because I was the class clown. And they listened to me when I was 25 and 30 because I was arrogant and made bold, pompous statements with strong conviction. And I was speaking in an area that I was competent in, like, you know, I originally spoke in marketing. So, and I could talk about copywriting and offers and creating compelling offers in a way that made sense. But I was arrogant, which was coming from insecurity. So I was just really insecure, so I put on this facade. But people still listened to me, but not in that impactful a way. And when it really changed was, for me, was going through about 4 years of therapy. And then getting to the point where I really liked myself and could be in relationship with myself, which then allowed me to be in relationship with other people. So now I started coming from a position of authenticity, transparency, reality, relevancy, and then people really listened to me because I was talking about the stuff that mattered to them and had their best interest at heart. You know, and it's funny, I have an article in this month's edition of the magazine, Speaker Magazine, for the National Speakers Association. And I mentioned in there, there's a degree of narcissism in this business that people don't ever talk about. But you've got to have an ego. You've got to have some narcissism to say, hey, I should get up on a stage and tell people about whatever topic. I don't care if you're an etiquette coach or you're teaching sales training or how to use Word. You have to have some kind of ego to say, I have enough information to go up and tell an audience of 500 people how to do that something, or why they should do something, or why they shouldn't do something, right? And that's a narcissist. So I think a lot of us in the speaking profession, we get into business because of insecurity. So we go out and we're arrogant and bombastic, and we create, in my case, if I look at me, so, you know, who knows how much of this is just my
Sure.
projection, which I'm projecting on all the other speakers. But I got into business because I didn't know how to express love or accept love, because I wasn't raised in an environment like that. So I was this totally dysfunctional person. So I got my sustenance from standing ovations. Because I couldn't accept love, I received it through standing ovations. So in the focus of my 30s, my focus of the speech is, how do I perform this speech to get the biggest standing ovation? And, from 45 on probably is when my focus changed to, how do I speak with this audience in a way that they're really going to get this message and be able to apply it and use it to transform their life. And so when the focus switched from me to them, that's when the impact went light years
magnified ahead. So it's like from the self-centered aura, it became more of an act of service. And the interesting thing that you're mentioning, you've always been a leader, to your point. I think that it looks like the difference is the alignment and congruency that you have now, that wholeness, right? That holistic way in which you relate, and you're really trying to change lives and help people out. And I think that that's what transpires back. Some people confuse, the narcissistic part is all me, me, me. But you are connected to people. You realize you give. You're tuned into your audience in terms of realizing what they need. You become one in a way. It's really it's not anymore about you. And sometimes some people are a little afraid of acknowledging that, particularly if you're very prosperous, obviously a great businessman and everything else. But at the same time, I think you have to come to that internal understanding that it is okay to serve many people. It all comes back and continues to feed with everyone.
Yeah, and in my case, I'm the philosophy of objectivism, Ayn Rand, enlightened self-interest, which is, I don't say, I'm just here to save the world. No, charity begins at home. The best, Reverend Ike used to say, the best thing you can do for broke people is not be one of them, So I believe that. My first responsibility is to become successful myself. My first responsibility is to be happy myself. My first responsibility is to be prosperous myself. And from that gives me great power to help other people become healthy, happy, and prosperous. But you can't teach it till you've done it yourself. Chase the meaning, not the money. And if you chase the meaning, the money is going to take care of itself.
Do you find people getting confused about that concept along the way? Did you find that people who are not making a difference are really chasing the money? And
yeah, and as I look at the YouTube channel, that's where, and my books, that's where I get the most questions is purpose and assignment. When I talk about finding your, discovering your assignment, or perhaps more appropriately, your assignment discovering you, and living with purpose. I more questions on that than anything else.
How did you find your assignment, your purpose? If you look back, how did that come to you?
It was reading, because I'm a reader. So for me, it's reading great thinkers. So it was reading people like Ayn Rand and realizing that for me to live a life of happiness, I needed to live by congruent principles which made up together create a congruent philosophy for living.
How long did it take to understand the meaning?
I'm still working on it. Still working on it. That's a journey that will never end.
Thank you for watching my show. I hope you enjoyed Randy Gage's interview as much as I did. Let's think about 3 things that can help you make life even more interesting. First of all, what's the balance between your positive and negative thoughts? Are you aware of this? Are you aware of the kinds of thoughts that you're having throughout the course of the day? Awareness is one of the first things to be able to then figure out what is the right balance for you. The second point here is Do you see yourself being very critical of other people, or are other people constantly telling you that you're constantly saying what they've done wrong without, giving them any truth or without letting them breathe? That's a second way in which you can also see if you're being more negative of everyone around, which is somewhat reflective of the way that you feel about yourself anyways. The third point is, do you find the negative in sometimes saying, for example, starting off with a positive but then shifting into a negative? For example, you say, yes, but. Or someone compliments you, for example, and says, you look great today. You could say something like, oh, yes, but my hair didn't come out the way I wanted, or my work was not completed the way that I intended to be complete, or everything went wrong. That is another way in which you can try to create some way of figuring out if you're balancing more into the positive or the negative. The second point is, are your beliefs launching or limiting your success? How would you look into this? Well, the first point would be around automatic thoughts as well. Let's say that you come up with a great idea, or someone comes to you with a great idea, and your first instinct is to kill the idea. Your first instinct is to say, well, yes, but. Your first instinct is to try to come up with all the reasons why that cannot be done. The second point to think there is, when you start thinking more of why that idea is not a good idea rather than why it would be a good idea, that's another barometer for you that you should keep in consideration. And the third point would be, if you feel that other people are not even asking you about some of their great ideas because they kind of anticipate that you're going to turn them down, then try to look around and see, do people come to you for advice? Do people come to you to see what you would think about some things? Or do they usually come to you knowing that you're going to kill their idea? Okay, so that's the second point to think about. The third one is to look into your relationships. Do you feel your relationships are enhancing, or are they really boycotting your success? And the first point here is, look around yourself and see if you're surrounding yourself by positive people that really enhance your success, or if you're really being surrounded by people who are constantly criticizing you, who don't like what you do or what you stand for. And then take a look at that as well, because if the balance is more in the negative, that won't enhance your success to begin with. The second point is, do you feel that your immediate family members are helping you with your ideas, with manifesting your ideas, or are they really killing them even before you get them started? The third point is, stop asking around if you feel that when you ask, people are killing your ideas. Now, what I usually find in my practice, both as a doctor or as a coach, is that when people start asking around, particularly when they ask around to other people who tend to have a negative view about them or their ideas, in a way they're using the wrong approval process. They're not trusting themselves. So go with your heart, figure out that if you really have an amazing idea, if you really want to follow your heart, you are the one to determine what it is that you want to do, when it is that you want to do, and how to get it going. So food for thought. Think about these points. The awareness, as we mentioned, improving, looking around, and finding more positive than negative in your life. Make life interesting. Thanks for watching my show, and I look forward to seeing you soon. Enjoy.